If you lived in ancient Babylon, one mistake could destroy your life, not ruin your reputation, not cost you money. Destroy your life. Before we begin, I want you to do something simple. Imagine living in a world where every action had a clearly defined consequence carved in stone for everyone to see. If history fascinates you and you want to understand how ancient civilizations really worked, subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. This channel reconstructs the past the way people actually lived it. Now let's step into Babylon. Nearly 4,000 years ago, around 1750 for BC, Babylon was one of the most powerful cities in the world. Massive walls surrounded it. The Euphrates River flowed beside it. Trade routes connected it to distant lands. It was wealthy, organized, advanced. But beneath the markets, temples, and palaces stood something even more powerful than its army. The law. King Hammurabi ruled Babylon, and he did something revolutionary. He created one of the earliest written legal systems in human history, the Code of Hammurabi. These laws were carved into a tall stone stele and placed in public view. This was not secret law, this was visible law. Everyone could see the consequences, and those consequences were severe. If a man stole, his hand could be cut off. If someone destroyed another person's eye, their own eye could be destroyed. If a house collapsed because a builder constructed it poorly and killed the owner, the builder could be executed. This is where the famous principle comes from. An eye for an eye. But here's where things become more complicated. Babylon was not equal. Society was divided into classes, nobles, commoners, slaves, and the same crime did not always carry the same punishment. If a noble harmed another noble, the penalty was harsh. If a noble harmed a slave, compensation might replace physical punishment. Justice was structured, but it was not equal. And this creates a deeper question: was Babylon brutal? Or was it one of the first real attempts at organized justice? Before Hammurabi, laws often depended on the ruler's mood. Punishments could be unpredictable. Babylon changed that. Rules were written, permanent, public. People knew the risk before committing a crime. Imagine walking through the market knowing that if you cheated someone, the punishment was already decided, not by emotion, but by law. But crime still happened. Theft, fraud, false accusations, assault, and sometimes even mistakes led to devastating consequences. If a surgeon performed surgery and the patient died, his hands could be cut off. If a son struck his father, his hands could be cut off. Family, business, contracts, everything was regulated. But here's something most people don't realize. Some laws actually protected the vulnerable. If a man accused a woman without proof, he could face punishment. If a judge altered his decision after making a ruling, he could be fined and permanently removed from office. Even judges were not above the law. And that was radical for its time. Now, think about that. In a world without modern courts, prisons, or appeals, Babylon created a system where consequences were defined. It was harsh, but it was consistent, and consistency creates order. However, there was a darker side. Debt could turn you into a slave. If you could not repay what you owed, you, or even members of your family, could be forced into debt servitude. But unlike many later systems, debt servitude in Babylon was often limited to a specific number of years. It was not always permanent. Still, survival depended on caution. A failed harvest, a bad business deal, a false accusation. Any of these could change your life overnight. Now, let me ask you something. Would you prefer a world where punishments are harsh but predictable? or a world where punishments depend on who is in power, Babylon chose predictability. And that predictability created stability. Trade flourished. Contracts were written on clay tablets. Businesses expanded. Families negotiated marriages with legal protections. The law was not just about punishment, it was about control. It told citizens, your actions matter, your choices have consequences. But here is the final twist most people overlook. The Code of Hammurabi begins with something surprising. It claims that the king received his authority from the gods to bring justice to the land, to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak. Whether that was political messaging or genuine belief, the intention was clear. Law was presented as protection, not just punishment, and that's what made Babylon powerful. It was not chaos, it was controlled civilization. Yes, the punishments were severe, yes, the system was unequal, but it was structured. It was visible. It was one of humanity's first attempts to replace personal revenge with institutional justice. And that changed history. Now, imagine standing in the shadow of that stone stele, reading the laws carved into it. You would know exactly what would happen if you crossed the line. Fear, maybe, but also clarity. And clarity builds order. If this deep dive into ancient justice changed the way you see the past. Subscribe to the channel and comment below. Do you think Babylon's system was brutal or advanced for its time? Because the truth is uncomfortable. Civilization is not built on kindness alone. It is built on rules. And rules only work when consequences are real. Ancient Babylon understood that. And that is why its laws are still remembered thousands of years later. But the story does not end with Hammurabi's lifetime. After his death, Babylon continued to evolve. The Code of Hammurabi was not the first set of laws in Mesopotamia. Earlier rulers like Yornamu and Lipitishtar had already written legal codes, but Hammurabi's was the most complete and the best preserved. Nearly 282 laws were inscribed on the stele. Not all survived intact, but most of them remain readable today. The stele itself was not even found in Babylon. In 1901, French archaeologists discovered it in the ancient city of Susa in modern-day Iran. It had been taken there as war booty centuries after Hammurabi's reign. That alone tells us something powerful. Even Babylon's enemies saw value in preserving its laws. The top of the stele shows Hammurabi standing before Shamash, the Mesopotamian god of justice and the sun. This image reinforced the idea that law was sacred, not merely political. And here is another important detail. Despite its severity, many historians believe the code was not necessarily applied mechanically in every single case. Judges still interpreted disputes. Evidence was required. Witnesses were called. Contracts were examined. The written law created a framework, but human judgment still played a role. Clay tablets recovered from Babylon show real court cases, property disputes, marriage agreements, inheritance conflicts, business contracts. Ordinary people actively used the legal system. That may be the most revolutionary part. The law was not abstract, it was used. And perhaps that is why the Code of Hammurabi remains so significant today. It represents a turning point in human civilization, the moment when justice began to move away from personal retaliation and toward structured governance. It was imperfect. It was unequal, it was harsh, but it was organized. And organization is one of the foundations of civilization itself. For 1,000 years later, we still debate fairness, equality, punishment, and authority. And in many ways, we are still asking the same questions the Babylonians faced under Hammurabi. What is justice? Who defines it? And how far should the law go to maintain order? Ancient Babylon did not solve these questions forever, but it forced humanity to confront them in stone.